we have a problem in Romania because people don't really read, you know. They don't like to read, and I blame Netflix for that. So I
yes, I agree.
And we are trying to make fun activities to make people like reading, being younger, you know.
Yes.
Because at 40, maybe if you haven't read all of your life, you know.
Yeah.
And
no, that's the time to start,
yeah.
is when people are young, and also young people really get it. They understand how fun and exciting it is to imagine a story in written form in your head. You know, when you are watching a movie, you are receiving someone else's storytelling, and it's passive. But if you are reading a book, or if you're a smaller child and someone is reading to you, you are creating it in your mind. You are the director, and you are all the actors and all the voices, and you are the person behind the camera, and all of that in your mind, and it's just much more full experience. I love movies, but only books can take you all the way in to a story.
Because I bet that happened to you when you watch a movie and you read the book. It's never the same, because you had you saw the characters differently. You imagined them differently, you know?
It's true. Actually, my whole life, there's only one movie that was better than the book.
Which one?
𝗔heç𝗱𝗶𝗶.
Okay, I don't know it. It's better. I need to write that down. I need to see this.
Do it's well worth it. It's absolutely brilliant, beautiful, wonderful movie from 40 years ago, but they just did it so beautifully. Pulls at your heartstrings.
Okay, that's already noted. But what I'm curious, how do you write fantasy? I don't understand the process. For example, you look at people you know and you put the people you know into your characters, or you just imagine everything?
The answer is some of both. So everyone I meet is at risk of being put into my story. So you are possibly in deep trouble here. You could become a dragon or a wizard or anything in between. It's a very good question. Let me say that even though I write fantasy, I write about all these imaginary worlds and invented characters like no one has ever met before. I get my best ideas from real life, because the real world has so much diversity and wonder and magic. But you really have to open your senses. You have to perceive totally and fully all of your senses, sight and taste and sound and touch, hearing, really be fully alive where you are. Then you're going to get so much good material. And if you just add a little drop of magic, a little drop of imagination, anything is possible.
Yeah, indeed.
And now, Andrei, you also asked me why I like fantasy. And I'd like to talk about that too, because it's very important. Fantasy is the stuff of dreams, our dreams, but it's more than that. I think of fantasy more like a bent mirror, where you see yourself in the mirror, but things are different. Certain, your nose is way bigger, or your eyes are smaller. Whatever the scene is exaggerated or reduced. And in fantasy, you get to do that with our real world. You get to take qualities all around us that exist and change their dimensions, so you can bring forward something really important. Like all of my books, for example, are bring forward environmental problems about our world and our ability to live with clean air and clean water, and beautiful forests and our connection to other creatures who inhabit this beautiful, lonely planet called Earth. All of that, I bring that forward. Or say the case of young Merlin. I didn't start out with a great and powerful wizard in those books at all, right? I start out with a boy who is half drowned, barely alive. He's washed ashore on this strange, hostile coastline, and he's so weak he can't even sit up, and he barfs seawater, and seagulls are screeching over his head, and his tunic is all torn to shreds, and he crawls a little bit higher on the shore, and he opens his eyes, and he realizes that he somehow survived some sort of a shipwreck to get to that place. And then he realizes something even worse happened to him, which is that he has lost all of his memory. Now, this is a character, just stop right there, who has, this is just the first 5 pages, right?
Yeah.
Of book 1 of 13 books now about young Merlin's adventures. But in that moment, what I did was bring forward in that bent mirror the image of the boy who is deep down inside of that elder wizard that we all know and love, Merlin with the long beard. But right in that moment, he's not that elder wizard, not even close. That elder wizard is full of, wisdom and majesty and powers, right? But this boy is scared. He doesn't have any sense of who he is. He's lost. He doesn't know his identity. He doesn't even know his own name. And that's where he starts. So that's the fun of fantasy. So because I can
beginning of the journey, like his
exactly.
journey.
But you change the dimensions. I purposely exaggerated his plight, and there he is. And we care about this boy. He doesn't know who he is. He has no clue that he's going to become this great, powerful wizard. And we get to see him as he goes there. So I think I'm going to say one more thing about fantasy is that it, as a way of storytelling, fantasy, and you see this in the Lord of the Rings books, or and those wonderful movies that were made of it, or the Harry Potter books, or any stories that deal with fantasy and magic. It really, one of the things that happens in fantasy is it makes the power of choices become even more important, because every little tiny decision, does Frodo actually decide to take the ring, or does Bilbo decide to let this strange and somewhat scary golem creature live for another day? All those little decisions, choices, you can magnify and clarify how important they are. So, because our choices really matter. And here's the thing, Andrei, if our choices matter, then we matter.
Well said indeed. But you said a very interesting thing, and maybe also for the children is very important to understand that every great character or world leader or a person we know, at some point he had been a child.
Yes. Yes.
He started like us, like everybody else.
Exactly. And I'm always drawn to young heroes because they are very unformed, and anything, literally anything could happen to them. And you don't know, they don't know, we don't know. And you get to see the most exciting part of their journey, which is how did they get to be where they go? What happened to them? What were their highest dreams, their deepest hopes, and what were their darkest fears, and what was it that frightened them more than anything else, and how did they overcome that, and what happened to them on the way, and did they, you know, in the case of young Merlin, that boy survives that morning on the beach, that strange coastline, barely, by the way, because there's more that happens to him on that beach that's pretty frightening, but he has to learn a lot to become that great elder wizard. I knew I had to take that boy through adventures and fabulous, exciting experiences, and bizarre characters and high risk, big danger moments. But on the way, he had to learn those qualities that make a true wizard. He had to learn about courage. He had to learn about how do you keep your hope alive even when it's really, really difficult. He had to learn how to be a loyal friend. He had to learn about love. He had to learn about grief when you lose someone you love. He had to learn about power. How do you use it? All of these things. He had to learn about compassion. And because he did, then one day, 1,000 years later, he'd be the perfect mentor for this young English character called Arthur, who would be the person who pulled a sword out from a stone and became the king of Camelot. You know, it all happened in such a dramatic way at that point in the elder Merlin's life. But how did he get there? How was he able to know what to do? And by the way, how could he live backwards in time? And how could he turn Arthur into a fish or a goose or all the other things he did? And this is really exciting stuff. Young heroes. And by the way, I think true heroes are always unlikely. They're really unlikely. They're not someone you'd look at and say, you know, that scrawny boy who washed ashore there and is barely strong enough to stand up, that he's going to become the greatest wizard of all times? Are you kidding? No way.
Do you know, I think it's very hard for you because you know how the journey needs to end for this character, you know, you have to get him on that path. Yes. And I think it's hard because you need to, like you said, I need to do that. I need to, I need him to learn courage, compassion, but you know where it's going. So my question is, when you write a book, do you know from the start how it will end, or you go with the flow of the characters?
That's a great question, Andrei. And the answer is both at once.
Okay, that's a great answer.
Well, it's a true answer that I've learned the hard way over these now 32 books behind me that have my name on them, and you'll see lots of different languages there too. I'm happy to say that Romanian is the newest of the languages.
Great.
But these books are really began when I had a dream. I actually had a dream, a nightmare about a boy drowning and barely able to get ashore. And I woke up, I was choking, and I felt like I was the boy and drowning. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, that boy is Merlin, but when he was a small boy. Now, that's where it began. But I bring it up, I tell you that because dreams come from one part of our brain. And this is part of your question. The only way to write, or I think actually it's bigger than writing, it's about creating.
Okay.
The only way to create something new, whether it's a book or a symphony or a beautiful painting or architecture like you have there in the beautiful streets of Bucharest, how do you create something in the world of art? You need both sides of your brain to be working. You need the left side of the brain that connects to the right hand, that's about logic and about rationality. How does, if you do A, does that produce B, and that produces C? So you could think about how does a character actually need to grow, and what are the experiences? And then you also need the other side of the brain, which is connected to the left hand, the right side of the brain. That side is where our dreams come from. It's the side where poetry comes from. It's the side where beautiful metaphors that really change the way we look at the world come from. And I think to create something magnificent, you need to have both sides of your brain engaged. So the question is, how do you do that?
Exactly.
And for, I think, every creative artist, it's different. For me, I need to start with an outline, because I need to have that rational, that overview. It's kind of like a map. I create a map in my mind of the journey that is going to happen in this story, and then I dive down onto the map, and I start writing, and I actually start developing characters. Sometimes I step aside and I do character sketches of individual characters. I write about not just what do they look like and what do they act like, but what is their place in society, and what do they love? What are they afraid of? What are their deepest dreams? All of those things. What are their darkest fears? All of that. And then, by the way, if I'm really cooking, then these characters will speak to me, and I'll hear their voices. Oh, that's when the magic happens, because then I know both sides of my brain are working, because the voice is coming from that dream mind. Okay. But I also have a map of where I need to go. And by the way, all of this changes during the course of writing. This is why I do 8 or 9 drafts, complete rewrites of every book that I write. Oh my God. It's true. I write my very first one by hand. Okay. And we can talk about that later if you're interested, but I do that, and then because it slows me down, and the chemistry works, and then I revise and I revise and I revise, and it's always getting better, and other voices are calling to me, and sometimes a character will say, you know what I told you before about what my greatest dream is, it's really not. I was afraid to tell you that, but this is really where I want to go. And it produces, if you have to, as a writer, you have to listen to your characters. And I'm sure the same is true for a musician. You have to listen to where the music is carrying you, and what each different instrument is telling you and wants to say. And that's ultimately, this is a magical process. I think you could tell. That's when it really happens. But you need to have both sides engaged. So what you're telling me is that you write the first draft by pen? Yeah. Really? I do. And then what's the process then? You type it, you read it and type it on the computer, or how do you do that? Yeah. It only goes to the computer after I've written it completely by hand in notepads with my big fat blue pen, and even my big fat novels like the Great Tree of Avalon trilogy, that's part of the Merlin saga, that's over 1,000 pages. I wrote them all by hand at first. My new book that just came out, that's the prequel to the Merlin saga, it's called Giant. I just wrote it all out by hand, and then I got it onto computer, and then I started revising and revising and revising, and then it gets tighter and stronger, and then I realized, you know what, it shouldn't end the way I thought it was going to end. It needs to change, and I need to make sure there's a different theme here that's really now bubbling up. This is really a deeper level of what this story is actually about that I didn't know myself when I started. Or I'll say, smaller things like this scene really needs a lot more humor. There's some really action-packed scenes on both sides of it, and I need a place where the reader who's receiving the story can just take a breath and have a different pace. And And so I want a quiet stroll through a magical woods, or I need just something that's ridiculously silly and funny, and weave all that together. But you're really making something. I don't care whether it's telling a story, writing a song, baking some great bread, building a gorgeous new parliament building in Bucharest. Whatever you're doing, you need to be in touch with not just the first concept of your design, but what the design is telling you as you get into it. And so it's a magical process. Honestly,
Yeah.
after more than 30 books, Andrei, I still can't understand it, but I know what helps make it happen, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, but it seems really hard work.
It is, you know.
It's not like, oh my God, I'm going to write something.
That's a question I didn't expect you to ask, but the truth is, it's the hardest work I have ever done. And I have done a lot of things. I have run a business. I have, in New York City, I have built a log cabin in the mountains of Colorado. I have taught school. I've been a dad, which is the most fun and wonderful job of all of the jobs. But I can tell you that writing is the hardest work of all. At the same time, here's the secret. It is also the most meaningful work. It is really special. Of course, being a dad is even more meaningful. Yeah. Being a parent is the most wonderful gift of all. But the truth is, of jobs where I have been employed, nothing has been as hard work as writing. And at the same time, nothing has given me deeper joy than sharing a story with other people that really feels authentic and powerful and true for them. You know, when we were talking about fantasy, I should tell you that this may sound puzzling, but the best fantasy, the best imaginary stories must be true.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean they're true in everyday life. Okay, you're not going to walk out of your building there on the streets of Bucharest and enter into the magical world of 𝗖𝗶છી right there with giants and wizards and all other things and dragons attacking you and everything.
Although metaphorically.
I suppose, yes, I guess that is true. That is true. But and especially you're at Litera Publishing House, so anything really truly can happen, right? Yeah. So but but what I mean is they have to feel true. They have to feel true for anybody of any background. Let me say one more thing about this, because you got me going with a very important question. When I was a young writer, just starting, I had left my business job to see if I could actually write one book or two books maybe, because I wanted to try. I knew I needed to try. And I was just getting started, and I realized the books that have really changed my life, the stories in whatever form, books or movies or plays, what have really changed my life are the stories that it didn't matter whether they were written by someone in a different country or from a different century or from or who spoke a different language. None of that mattered, right? Because the best stories just really stand the test of time. And books and movies and plays and poetry that really lift us, music that touches our heart, also would have touched people's heart 1,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. It doesn't matter. And that's because stories, like all great art, have the power to actually leap across all of the boundaries that too often separate people from each other. And I'm talking about, you know what I mean, boundaries like language or religion or geography, separation by 5,000 miles, or time or culture gender, any number of things that we use to separate. In fact, a really good story, none of that matters. And once about, I don't know, I guess it was now 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, I was at the Frankfurt Book Fair in Germany. And I've been there like 4 or 5 times. But this one, I'll never forget, because when I was signing books at the end of my presentation, and there were people from all over, not just from all over Europe, but from all over the world who had come, and people from Japan and China and Korea and Africa and South America. And it was phenomenal, all of whom love books. And I looked out at the sea of faces and different traditional costumes that people were wearing from their homeland. And one person came up to me afterwards who was dressed in all kinds of amazing jewelry, and he walked up to me. He's a very big, imposing fellow. He walked up to me and he said, "Mr. Barron," in perfect English, and he said, "My name is Jeffrey, and I am a Druid, and I live with my people in the forest of Bavaria, but I have walked here to tell you I am so grateful, and we all are, for your stories that bring the wizard Merlin back into this world." And I said, "Jeffrey, thank you, but stop. You give me way too much credit. Merlin is already very, very much in this world. He is very much here. And all I am is one more person among thousands who have told stories about Merlin." And he said, "Oh, but you told us about his youth and about how he became the wizard." And I said, "Yeah, yes, that is true. But I feel like Merlin came to me in a dream and told me I have to tell that story. So it's really still Merlin who should get the credit." He said, "It doesn't matter. I am full of gratitude for you." And then he took off of his neck one of the beautiful amulets that he had, which is an amulet of a great tree.
Oh my God.
With a great oak tree with a tiger's eye in the middle. And he said it was made by one of our craftsmen in our Druid community.
Okay.
And I want to give it to you to thank you for your books. But most of all, I want you to know, when you see this and put it on, I want it to remind you that every story you tell will reach people far, far away, people you might never meet ever in your life, people who will be touched deeply by your words. It doesn't matter what language they speak, doesn't matter where they are, it doesn't matter where they live, but stories can do that. Remember.
That's amazing. Oh my God.
And I wear this every day, and it always reminds me that I feel humbled is the big point. I feel humbled to be in I feel humbled to be a participant in this magical craft that actually has the power to connect people from everywhere. And these books behind me and all this fan art that you see that people have given me that is here in my writing room. I have more walking sticks, wizards staffs than anybody, I think, in the world, because people keep sending me wizard staffs. But I feel like all this great connection is about the power of story. It's not about me. It's about story's power to reach people of every description.
But thank you for sharing that with us. And the little necklace. That's very good. And I think it's very important for a writer to understand that he reaches a lot of people who perceive their art differently. And you can change somebody's life and you don't even know that.
That's right. That's right. That's the power of art.
Yeah, yeah.
And let me say on that, you could also ask that same question by looking at this character, Merlin, that I've spent so much time with, okay? I've written 13 books now. That book I showed you was the 13th. And now Disney is making a beautiful movie out of the first book in the Merlin saga. These are a different kind of storytelling, but they're all about the same character, Merlin. And you might ask, okay, you put that together with what the Druid told me at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and you realize this character, Merlin, has been speaking to people, touching people, making a difference in their lives for now over 1,500 years.
Yeah, true.
Because the very first stories date back to the Welsh Mabinogi, and there were oral traditions in the 5th, 6th century of Britain. Now, you have to ask, why is that? And part of it is the power of story that we've been talking about, but part of it is also the power of this character, Merlin. And I've thought a lot, Andrei, about what it is that makes Merlin stay with us and be so present. And I think there are 3 qualities about him. One is that Merlin honestly is about connecting all people. The stories, the first stories are of him in Camelot. And the 11th, 12th century ballads about Merlin and Arthur and Geoffrey of Monmouth and all of those tales. Merlin's role is to bring together people that you wouldn't normally bring together. He's the one who speaks with the beggar on the street, as well as the king and queen and their royal assembly. He's also sent on one old Celtic story tells about Merlin being sent by Arthur to go to the Archbishop of Canterbury, major religious figure in the Christian religion, where Merlin is a Druid, so he's not a Christian, and yet he's the one who makes that connection. And then it gets even better. In this story, he goes out and sits on a hillside, whistles, and an old gray wolf comes and sits next to him like a brother, and they look into each other's eyes and talk. Now, so that's a character who's universal, who reaches across all boundaries between different kinds of people and not just humans, creatures. Yeah. And the second thing is Merlin also has a deep sense of his own flaws. He makes mistakes. He's vulnerable. He's human as well as magical. And he sees that in himself is both light and dark. And that makes him more compassionate. And by the way, a better mentor to the young King Arthur when it gets to the Camelot story. And then the third thing that is the place I really land most fully is Merlin always drew his greatest magic from nature. Nature is Merlin's greatest teacher, his greatest healer, his greatest inspiration. And by the way, the same could be said for me. So I really identify with Merlin's connection to nature, natural world. And so you put all that together and ask yourself, do those 3 qualities, connecting all people, seeing the light and the dark in ourselves and being humble and compassionate, and reconnecting with nature, do those sound like 3 qualities we need today in the 21st century of the world?
And that's the truth of the story you are telling me about.
Exactly. And that's the deeper level that story gets to. So if you can tell a good story, it crosses all of those boundaries among people. That's why Geoffrey the Druid gave me this. And at the same time, you get to deal with these deeper, really powerful ideas. ideas that really that are about what is it to be human? What is it to live a life? Do my choices really matter? Does my life really matter? Can I make a difference? Why am I here? All of those kinds of questions, that's where good stories can take you.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It's been a great pleasure, but in the end, I want to ask you, can you tell a few words for your Romanian fans, the 𝗔𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗶 from Romania?
Of course, of course. I would like to invite my fans in Romania to have a wonderful journey with my Merlin books and any of my other books. And most of all, I hope you will have a great, exciting adventure. And at the same time, I hope my stories will cause you to be surprised and feel some of those deep, big questions about life. Feel the mystery of life.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Thank you so much for your time and for your great stories and for all the insights, because we have learned a lot today. And I think you told us a lot of secrets. I don't know, writing secrets, and it's very fun to understand the process a little bit. You know,
it's, Andrei, it's only possible because you asked such wonderful questions.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Well, from my writing room here in Colorado, USA, that's part of library and part Merlin's crystal cave and part all of the art gallery of all this fan art from people around the world. I just want you to know how grateful I am that my stories will be shared in Romania, and it makes me deeply, deeply happy. I hope you and your readers will have as much joy in reading my books as I had in writing them.
That's absolutely perfect. You said it perfectly, and I know they actually do. They actually enjoy your books, and now we wait for the Disney thingy you told me about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.